Commander Park Jin had seen a lot in his 20 years of military service, but nothing prepared him for standing in front of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The massive chamber stretched above him like a cathedral, filled with floating, holographic displays and alien creatures that looked like they came from nightmares. Some had too many eyes, others had tentacles instead of arms, and a few looked like walking crystals that sang when they moved. The leader of this strange gathering was Councillor Vex, a being made entirely of what looked like living diamond. When he moved, his body made soft musical sounds like expensive wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but there was nothing gentle about what he was saying. "Commander Park Jin of Earth," Vex's voice echoed through some kind of translation device. "Your species has caused quite a stir in our peaceful galaxy. You humans seem to have a talent for disrupting the natural order of things." Park Jin kept his face blank, a skill he had learned during countless military briefings. Behind him, he could feel his team shifting nervously. Lieutenant Kim Hana, his second in command, was probably fighting the urge to reach for her sidearm. She had never trusted aliens, and this meeting was not helping her opinion. "We have the perfect solution for your energetic species," Vex continued, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been amusement. "A special assignment that will put your unique abilities to the test." A massive holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a planet that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very twisted sense of humor. The world spun slowly, revealing a surface covered in jagged crystal, formations, swirling storms that crackled with lightning, and oceans that steamed with toxic vapors. "Kepler 442c, Vex announced with what sounded like pride. "Our scientists have classified it as a Class 0 Deathworld. Do you know what that means?" "Human." Park Jin studied the rotating planet. "I assume it means it's dangerous." Several alien council members made sounds that might have been laughter. One creature that looked like a giant jellyfish with too many brains floating inside its transparent body wobbled with apparent mirth. "Dangerous is an understatement," Vex replied. "This world has gravity 4 times stronger than your Earth. One step on its surface would crush most beings instantly. The atmosphere is filled with sulfuric acid that can dissolve metal in minutes. The entire planet is constantly battered by electrical storms so powerful they make your nuclear weapons look like children's toys." Dr. Lee Minho, the team's chief scientist, leaned forward with obvious interest. Park Jin could practically hear the gears turning in the man's head. Lee had always been attracted to impossible challenges, and this planet was checking all his boxes. "The indigenous life forms are perhaps the most interesting feature," Vex continued, clearly enjoying his presentation. "Crystalline predators that can slice through most known materials. They hunt in packs and show remarkable intelligence. 7 previous expeditions have attempted to establish outposts on Kepler 442c. The longest any team survived was 14 hours. Engineer Choi Nari whispered something to Dr. Lee, her eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. Park Jin had chosen his team well. Where most people would see certain death, his people saw engineering problems waiting to be solved. "Your mission, should you choose to accept it," Vex said, his tone suggesting that refusal was not really an option, "is to establish a permanent research station on Kepler 442c. You will study the planet's unique properties and report your findings to the Council." The unspoken message was clear to everyone in the room. The Council expected the humans to die quickly and quietly, solving what they saw as the human problem without having to resort to open warfare. Park Jin looked at his team. Lieutenant Kim Hana gave him a small nod, her hand resting casually on her weapon. Dr. Lee Minho was practically vibrating with excitement, already lost in scientific calculations. Engineer Choi Nari had pulled out a tablet and was taking notes on the planet's specifications. Communications Officer Yoon Suki was recording everything, her fingers flying over her equipment. "We are honored by this opportunity," Park Jin said, finally his voice steady and respectful. "When do we leave?" The reaction in the chamber was immediate. Several council members exchanged glances that looked distinctly relieved. Some made sounds that might have been celebratory. The giant jellyfish creature actually seemed to deflate slightly, as if a great weight had been lifted from its many shoulders. Vex's crystalline form brightened noticeably. "Excellent. Your transport leaves in 3 standard days. We have provided you with all available data on Kepler 442c, though I must warn you that most of it comes from the final transmissions of the previous expeditions." As the formal session ended and the holographic displays faded, Park Jin could hear the council, members talking among themselves in their various alien languages. The translation devices only caught fragments, but the general tone was clear. They were congratulating each other, celebrating what they saw as a clever solution to their human problem. "The human issue resolves itself," Vex remarked to a nearby council member, apparently forgetting that his words were still being translated. "Even these aggressive creatures cannot survive Kepler 442c. In a few weeks, we will hold a memorial service and be done with them forever." Park Jin smiled slightly as he led his team out of the chamber. The aliens thought they were sending humans to their deaths, but they had made one critical error. They had never bothered to truly understand what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Where others saw impossible challenges, humans saw Tuesday. The landing pod Baekdu shook like a tin can in a tornado as it punched through Kepler 442c's atmosphere. Pilot Yoon Suki had flown through asteroid fields and survived space battles, but nothing had prepared her for this. The atmosphere itself seemed alive and angry, trying to eat their ship from the outside in. Hull temperature at critical levels, she called out, sweat beading on her forehead despite the ship's cooling systems working overtime. "The acid out there is literally trying to dissolve us while we fly." Lightning bolts thicker than tree trunks slammed into their shields with the force of nuclear explosions. Each strike lit up the cockpit like a camera flash and sent vibrations through the ship that rattled their teeth. The storm outside wasn't just weather, it was warfare between the sky and everything trying to exist beneath it. Commander Park Jin strapped himself in tighter as another massive jolt nearly threw him from his seat. Through the reinforced windows, he could see crystalline formations jutting from the planet's surface like frozen screams. They sparkled with their own internal light, beautiful and deadly at the same time. "Gravity's getting stronger," Yoon Suki grunted, fighting the controls as the planet's pull tried to drag them down faster than safe. "It's like the whole world wants to crush us into paste." The landing was less of a controlled descent and more of a barely controlled crash. The pod hit the surface with enough force to crack the reinforced landing struts, and everyone inside felt their bones compress under the sudden increase in gravity. What should have been a gentle touchdown became a reminder that this world didn't. "Welcome, visitors." Sergeant Otaiho was the first to try standing up after landing, and he immediately regretted it. The moment he got to his feet, the 4.2 times Earth gravity hit him like a sledgehammer. His knees buckled, and he had to grab onto a support beam to keep from face-planting onto the metal floor. "Holy mother of," he gasped, feeling like someone had strapped a refrigerator to his back. "How are we supposed to work in this?" Every step felt like walking through thick mud while carrying another person on his shoulders. Simple movements that should have been automatic now required real effort and planning. Even breathing felt harder, like the air itself weighed more than it should. Lieutenant Kim Hana activated the external cameras to get their first real look at their new home. The view outside was like something from a fever dream. Crystal formations jutted from the ground at impossible angles, some as tall as skyscrapers and others spreading across the landscape like frozen spiderwebs. The storm above them raged, with a fury that made Earth's worst hurricanes look like gentle spring rain. "Are those things moving?" she asked, pointing at what looked like crystalline shapes shifting between the larger formations. Dr. Lee Minho practically pressed his face against the display screen, his scientific curiosity overriding any reasonable fear response. His instruments were already going crazy, picking up energy readings that shouldn't have been possible. "This is absolutely incredible," he shouted over the howling wind that they could hear even through their heavily insulated pod. "The electrical activity out there is off the charts. Those lightning strikes aren't just random. They're following patterns like the planet has its own nervous system." Specialist An Ji-young was running scans on the local wildlife, or what passed for wildlife on this nightmare world. Her equipment kept beeping with new contacts, each one representing a life form that shouldn't have been able to exist in such hostile conditions. "I'm picking up at least 3 distinct species of mobile crystalline entities," she reported, her voice mixing excitement with healthy concern. "They're big, they're fast, and they seem to be curious about our landing pod." Through the storm, they could see shapes moving with purpose rather than the random motion of debris. These weren't just rocks being blown around by the wind. These were living things that had adapted to call this hellscape home. Engineer Choi Nari was already pulling up construction protocols on her tablet, somehow managing to work despite the gravity, trying to crush her fingers into the device. "We need to establish a power source before we can even think about setting up a base," she said. "Standard generators won't work in this environment." Dr. Lee's eyes lit up with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that had gotten him into trouble on previous missions. "Actually, we might not need standard generators at all. Those lightning strikes, they're pure energy just waiting to be harvested. If we can build collection arrays, we could turn this storm into our power plant." The idea was crazy enough that it just might work. Instead of fighting the planet's hostile environment, they could harness it. The same storms that were supposed to kill them could become their greatest asset. Within hours of landing, the team had transformed from survivors into settlers. Using materials from their pod and some creative engineering, they managed to deploy energy collection arrays that turned the constant lightning strikes into usable power. The sight of humans working in conditions that had killed 7 previous expeditions was being broadcast back to the Galactic Council's observation post. Up in orbit, Councillor Vex watched the impossible unfold on his monitoring screens. His crystalline form was resonating at frequencies that indicated extreme stress, creating a sound like breaking glass played in slow motion. "This cannot be happening," he muttered to his fellow council members. "They should be dissolved puddles by now. The atmosphere alone should have killed them within minutes of exposure." But the humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. By the end of their first day on Kepler 442c, they had established a functioning power grid, identified multiple species of indigenous life forms, and begun construction of what looked suspiciously like permanent structures. The Council had sent the humans to die quietly on an impossible world. Instead, they were getting front-row seats to watch humanity do what it did best: take the impossible and make it look easy. 3 months after the humans had landed on what was supposed to be their grave, the daily reports coming back from Kepler 442c were making the Galactic Council question everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. What had started as a death sentence had somehow turned into the most successful colonization project in recorded galactic history. Commander Park Jin's morning transmission began the same way it had for the past month, with him standing outside, in the open air of a planet that should have killed him instantly. The toxic atmosphere that could dissolve metal was being filtered through a breathing mask that looked like something a construction worker might wear on Earth. Behind him, the settlement had grown from a desperate survival camp into something that looked suspiciously like a thriving town. "Day 93 on Kepler 442c, Park Jin reported cheerfully, as if he were giving a weather update instead of broadcasting from hell. "Temperature is holding steady at what we've started calling pleasantly warm, about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. The acid rain stopped yesterday, so we're expecting a beautiful day for outdoor activities." The casual way he discussed conditions that would instantly kill most galactic species was disturbing enough. But what was happening behind him in the colony was even worse from the Council's perspective. Humans were walking around in the crushing gravity like it was no big deal, their bodies having adapted to the point where the 4.2G environment had become their new normal. Dr. Lee Minho appeared on screen, carrying what looked like a small crystalline creature in his arms. The thing sparkled with internal light and had razor-sharp edges that could cut through most known materials, but Lee was holding it like a pet cat. "We've made incredible progress with the local wildlife," Lee explained, scratching the creature, behind what might have been its ears. "The crystal wolves, as we've been calling them, are remarkably intelligent. They seem to understand basic commands and show genuine affection toward their handlers." The camera panned to show Private Nam Junho working with a much larger crystal wolf, a creature the size of a small horse that glittered like a living diamond sculpture. The beast was sitting like an obedient dog, while Nam Junho fed it chunks of processed metal, its crystal teeth making musical sounds as it chewed. "This is Crystal," Nam Junho explained with obvious pride. "She's our first successful guard animal. Responds to voice commands in both Korean and basic galactic standard. Watch this, Crystal, patrol perimeter." The creature immediately stood and began trotting around the colony's outer fence, its crystalline body refracting the constant lightning strikes into beautiful rainbow patterns. What should have been a deadly predator had been turned into a family pet. But perhaps the most shocking footage came from the colony's recreational areas. The camera showed engineer Choi Nari suited up in what looked like modified protective gear, standing at the edge of an active lava flow that stretched down the mountainside like a river of molten death. "The thermal dynamics of these flows are absolutely fascinating," she called out over the roar of superheated rock. "We've developed surfboards from processed crystal material that can withstand the heat. The ride quality is amazing once you get used to dodging the thermal vents." Before anyone could stop her, Choi Nari pushed off and began surfing down the lava flow like it was a water slide at an amusement park. Her laughter echoed across the landscape as she navigated between geysers of liquid rock that shot hundreds of feet into the air. The temperature readings at the bottom of the screen showed heat levels that should have vaporized any known life form. But there she was, having the time of her life. The colony's children were perhaps the most disturbing sight of all. Born on Earth but raised in Kepler 442c's harsh environment, they were already showing genetic adaptations that shouldn't have been possible. Their bones were denser to handle the increased gravity. Their lung capacity had expanded to process the thin atmosphere more efficiently, and their skin had developed a slight metallic sheen that seemed to help them resist the acid rain. Kids love it here," reported colony teacher Park Soomin as she supervised a group of children playing in what looked like a modified playground. The equipment was made from crystal formations and powered by the constant electrical storms overhead. "They've adapted so well that they actually prefer the higher gravity. When we put them in the reduced gravity chambers for exercise, they complain that it feels too easy." The children were running and jumping with an ease that defied physics, their young bodies having adapted to conditions that would cripple adult members of most galactic species. Some of them were playing with small crystal creatures like they were hamsters, completely unaware that they were handling some of the deadliest predators in known space. Back in the council chambers, emergency sessions were being called almost daily. Councillor Vex's crystalline form had developed stress fractures from the constant anxiety, and his musical tones had shifted to frequencies that sounded like breaking glass. "This was not the plan," he repeated for the 100th time, his harmonics hitting notes of pure distress. "They were supposed to die quietly within the first week. Instead, they're turning our most dangerous world into a tourist destination." Latest reports showed that the humans had begun construction of what appeared to be guest facilities, complete with guided tours of the planet's most deadly features. They were advertising extreme environment experiences and authentic Deathworld adventures to any species brave enough to visit under human supervision. Other council members were equally disturbed. The floating jellyfish creature that served as the trade representative had deflated to half its normal size and refused to speak. The insectoid military advisor was clicking its mandibles in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. "How do we explain this to our constituents?" asked the council's communications director, a being that looked like a living shadow with too many eyes. "We sent them to die, and instead they've established the most successful colony in our sector. Our own scientists are requesting permission to study their adaptation methods." What made it worse was that the humans seemed genuinely grateful for what they saw as an opportunity rather than a death sentence. Commander Park Jin's daily reports always ended with thanks to the Council for giving them such an interesting challenge and requests for coordinates to other dangerous worlds that might benefit from human attention. The Galactic Council had created their worst nightmare, humans who were not only impossible to kill, but actively enjoyed the attempt. The solar flare warning came through the galactic communication network like a death knell. Every monitoring stationed in the sector lit up with emergency signals as their instruments detected radiation levels that could sterilize entire planets. The massive star that Kepler 442c orbited was having what scientists politely called a bad day, releasing enough deadly energy to cook anything living within 3 planetary orbits. In the council chambers, emergency meetings were called as representatives scrambled to coordinate evacuation protocols for any remaining research stations in the danger zone. Councillor Vex's crystalline form resonated with what might have been relief as he addressed the assembly. "The solar event will reach Kepler 442c in approximately 6 hours, he announced, his harmonic voice carrying across the chamber. Radiation levels will peak at 50,000 times the lethal dose for most known life forms. Even our most radiation-resistant species could not survive exposure at these levels." The other council members nodded gravely. The floating jellyfish creature inflated slightly, with what looked like satisfaction, while the insectoid military advisor clicked its mandibles in approval. Finally, the human problem would solve itself through natural causes. No one could blame the Council for an Act of Stellar Physics. "We should begin preparing memorial statements," suggested the communications director, its shadowy form shifting with anticipation. Something dignified about their brave sacrifice in the name of scientific advancement. Memorial speeches were drafted. Official condolences were prepared for transmission to Earth. The Council even commissioned a small monument to human determination, planning to place it in a safe location far from any other dangerous worlds. Everything was proceeding according to their revised plan when the first transmission from Kepler 442c arrived. Instead of final desperate messages or emergency evacuation requests, the communication opened with the sound of music. Not distress signals or death screams, but actual music. Something upbeat and festive that seemed completely inappropriate for a planet about to be bathed in lethal radiation. Commander Park Jin appeared on screen wearing what looked like a party hat made from crystalline material. Behind him, the colony was decorated with streamers that sparkled in the increasing radiation levels, and colonists were setting up what appeared to be picnic tables in the open air. "Greetings from Kepler 442c, Park Jin announced with his usual cheerful demeanor, "and welcome to our very first Solar Flare Day celebration." The council chamber fell silent, except for the sound of Councillor Vex's form cracking under stress. On-screen, Park Jin was standing outside without any radiation protection beyond his usual breathing apparatus, apparently immune to energy levels that should have reduced him to atoms. "We want to thank the Council for not warning us about this. Kvent," Park Jin continued, either unaware of or ignoring radiation detectors that were screaming warnings so loudly they could be heard over the transmission. "The surprise really made it special. We've declared today a colony-wide holiday." The camera panned across the settlement, showing scenes that defied every known law of biology and physics. Children were playing games in the courtyard while their parents grilled food over what appeared to be radiation-powered cooking devices. Some colonists had set up lawn chairs and were watching the aurora-like effects of the solar radiation interacting with the planet's crystal formations. Dr. Lee Minho burst into frame, his face literally glowing with excitement, and a small amount of radiation exposure that would have killed most beings instantly. "This is absolutely incredible," he said, gesturing enthusiastically toward massive collection arrays that had appeared around the colony. "The solar flare's radiation is interacting with the indigenous crystal formations in ways we never predicted. We're seeing a 300% increase in our atmospheric processing efficiency." The arrays he was pointing to were works of engineering that shouldn't have been possible. Somehow the humans had managed to build collection systems that were actually harvesting the deadly solar radiation and converting it into usable energy. The same stellar event that was supposed to end their colony had instead supercharged their entire operation. "We've been able to begin Phase 2 of our terraforming project 6 months ahead of schedule," Dr. Lee continued, his instruments recording data that would have been fascinating if it wasn't so terrifying. "The radiation is actually helping to break down some of the more toxic atmospheric compounds. By the time this event is over, we'll have a much more breathable environment." Engineer Choi Nari appeared next, wearing what looked like a radiation-detecting badge as a fashion accessory. "We've also discovered that the crystal creatures are absolutely thriving in these conditions," she reported. "Crystal and her pack are actually growing larger and more intelligent. It's like the radiation is some kind of superfood for them." The most disturbing part of the transmission came from medic Kang Seora, who was calmly treating what she described as minor sunburn on a colonist who had spent too much time outside during the solar flare's peak intensity. The minor sunburn would have been instantly fatal to any other known species, but she was applying basic first aid while chatting about the lovely light show the radiation was creating in the sky. "The aurora effects are really quite beautiful," she said, dabbing antiseptic on radiation burns that glowed softly in the dim lighting. "The children especially love the way the crystal formations light up when the radiation hits them. We're thinking of making this an annual celebration." In the background, those same children could be seen playing in specially designed radiation suits that looked more like party costumes than protective gear. Their laughter echoed across a landscape that should have been a radioactive wasteland, but instead looked like the site of the galaxy's most dangerous block party. The transmission ended with Commander Park Jin raising what appeared to be a toast to the solar flare, thanking it for providing such a wonderful energy boost, and expressing hope that they might experience similar events in the future. The radiation detectors finally stopped screaming as the flare began to subside, but the damage to the Council's sanity was permanent. Councillor Vex's crystalline form had dimmed to near transparency, a sign of extreme distress in his species. Around the chamber, other representatives were showing similar signs of psychological strain. The floating jellyfish creature had deflated completely and appeared to be having some kind of nervous breakdown. "What have we done?" Vex whispered, his harmonic voice barely audible. "We gave them a death world and they turned it into a paradise. We sent them a solar flare that should have ended all life on the planet, and they threw a party." The implications were becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The humans weren't just surviving impossible conditions, they were enjoying them. They had taken everything the universe could throw at them and asked for more. The Council's attempt to eliminate the human problem had instead created something far worse, humans who were now officially unstoppable. And somewhere in the depths of space, other colony ships were already changing course toward the deadliest worlds they could find, eager to see what other opportunities the galaxy had to offer. 1 year after the humans had been sent to die on Kepler 442c, the Galactic Council was forced to do something they had never done before in their 1,000-year history, officially admit they had made a terrible mistake. The planet that had been classified as the most dangerous world in known space was now listed in travel brochures as a premium adventure destination with 5-star accommodations and guided tours. The transformation was so complete that visiting dignitaries from across the galaxy were having trouble believing they were looking at the same world. Where jagged crystal formations had once spelled certain death, there were now carefully maintained walking paths with safety railings. The toxic atmosphere had been processed into something breathable for most species, though humans still recommended. Breathing apparatus for first-time visitors, just to be safe. Commander Park Jin stood on the observation deck of the orbital station that hadn't existed a year ago, looking down at a planet that bore little resemblance to the death world they had landed on. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering, built primarily from processed crystal materials that had been harvested from the planet's surface and refined into something stronger than most metals. Below them, luxury shuttles were arriving every few hours, bringing wealthy tourists from across the galaxy who paid extraordinary amounts of money for the chance to experience what their travel agents advertised as controlled danger under human supervision. The irony wasn't lost on Park Jin that the same creatures who had sent humans here to die were now paying humans to keep them alive in the same environment. "The resort bookings are completely full for the next 6 months, reported Tourism Director Yoon Minji, a former military logistics officer who had discovered an unexpected talent for hospitality management. "We've got waiting lists for the Crystal Wolf encounters, the controlled storm experiences, and the lava flow observation tours." The planet's most dangerous features had been turned into attractions. The crystalline predators that had killed, Previous expeditions were now trained companions who guided tours through the most spectacular parts of the landscape. The electrical storms that had once threatened to destroy everything in their path were now scheduled events that tourists watched from safe viewing platforms while sipping specially formulated drinks. Dr. Lee Minho had become something of a celebrity. In galactic scientific circles, publishing papers on adaptive terraforming in extreme environments that were being studied by researchers across hundreds of worlds. His techniques for working with rather than against hostile planetary conditions were revolutionizing how the galaxy approached colonization. We've received formal requests from 17 different worlds asking for human consultation on their impossible environmental challenges, Dr. Lee reported during the weekly status meeting. Apparently there are a lot of planets out there that other species have written off as uninhabitable, but perhaps the most significant change was in the children who had grown up on Kepler 442c. Now a year older and completely adapted to their environment, they moved through conditions that would crush most adult aliens with the casual ease of kids playing in a backyard. Some of them had never seen Earth and considered the crushing gravity and electrical storms to be completely normal parts of daily life. 10-year-old Park Ji-soo, daughter of one of the original colonists, had become something of a local celebrity among visiting tourists. She routinely gave demonstrations of crystal wolf training and led nature walks through areas that were still officially classified as extremely hazardous by galactic safety standards. "The grown-ups from other planets are funny," she explained to a group of visiting journalists, her small hand casually resting on the head of a crystal creature that sparkled with deadly beauty. "They act like everything here is scary, but it's just home. Crystal here is gentler than most Earth dogs I've met." Commander Park Jin's final official report to the Galactic Council was broadcast from the observation deck, with the transformed planet spread out behind him like a living advertisement for human ingenuity. Tourist shuttles moved in carefully, coordinated patterns, their passengers pressed against windows to get better views of landscapes that had once been considered unsurvivable. "On behalf of the Kepler 442c colony," Park Jin began, his smile carrying just a hint of the satisfaction he felt at their success, "I want to thank the Council for providing us with this incredible opportunity. The complete autonomy you granted us has allowed for some truly innovative approaches to planetary development." The phrase complete autonomy carried special weight, since the Council had essentially abandoned the planet after sending the humans there to die. That abandonment had given the humans free rein to develop the world according to their own methods, without interference from galactic regulations or oversight committees. Lieutenant Kim Hana appeared beside him, now carrying the title of Colonial Development Director, and holding a datapad that contained information that would give the Council nightmares for years to come. Her expression was pleasant and professional, but there was something predatory in her smile that made watching aliens nervous. "We've been studying the galactic databases and have identified several other Class 0 worlds that might benefit from human attention," she announced cheerfully. "We're particularly interested in the one with the acid oceans and active volcanic consciousness, and there's another with sentient weather patterns that looks absolutely fascinating." The casual way she discussed worlds that were considered absolutely lethal to all known life was perhaps more terrifying than any direct threat could have been. She spoke about acid oceans and living volcanoes the way a travel agent might discuss beach resorts and mountain retreats. "Our preliminary surveys suggest that with proper human management, these worlds could be transformed into thriving colonies within 18 to 24 months, Kim Hana continued. "We'd be happy to begin reconnaissance missions whenever the Council feels ready to expand the program." The transmission ended with Commander Park Jin offering a cheerful wave and a message that would haunt galactic leaders for generations. "We look forward to working with you again soon. After all, the galaxy has so many interesting challenges, just waiting for the right approach." In the council chambers, emergency sirens had been wailing for hours as representatives frantically reclassified their most dangerous worlds. Planets that had been marked as unsurvivable were now being relabeled as absolutely forbidden to all species, especially humans. Star systems with hostile conditions were being declared off-limits, and some council members were seriously, discussing the possibility of quarantining entire sectors of space. Counselor Vex's crystalline form had developed permanent stress fractures that created a constant low humming sound, like a crystal glass being slowly tortured. In his private logs, he wrote entries that read more like horror stories than official reports. "We created them," he recorded in one particularly disturbing entry. "We sent them to the most dangerous world we knew, hoping to eliminate them quietly. Instead, we taught them that our most deadly environments are just recreational opportunities. What happens when they discover we have entire star systems we consider too dangerous to approach? The humans had done something far worse than simply surviving the galaxy's attempt to kill them. They had made it look easy, turned it into a business, and then politely asked for more challenges. The Galactic Council was beginning to realize that they hadn't solved the human problem. They had created something much worse. They had created humans who knew beyond any doubt that the galaxy had nothing left that could stop them.